Calling all current and future leaders. What do or will your employees, or your followers or students, whatever you call them, what do your people, your team, think about you? Do they even know the real you well enough to know what to think about you? And importantly, do they have the same views toward you, even across races and ethnicities, ages, gender, and other areas of diversity? That's some food for thought, am I right? Hello there, this is Bradley, and you're listening to Psych Everywhere, a podcast by Psychi, the International Honor Society in Psychology. For this show, distinguished guests weigh in on applying psychological science to a diverse range of current events and to better your life. This episode was made possible through a special Psychi sponsorship with CSPP Alliant International University. If you'd like to learn more about graduate programs at CSPP, be sure to check out the link in the show notes for this episode. Today's guest speaker is Dr. Patricia Denise Lopez, who is a professor of organizational psychology at, you guessed it, Alliant International University. There, she specializes in leadership, motivation, team effectiveness, and change management. She received her PhD in organizational psychology from Columbia University Teachers College and has published numerous articles on leadership, innovation, and much more. She also co-authored the book Lead, Motivate, Engage: How to Inspire Your Team to Win at Work, which was published in 2019 with Dr. Pearl Hilliard. With more than 25 years in experience teaching, coaching, and consulting diverse managers and organizations in the United States and Asia Pacific, Dr. Lopez is going to talk to us today about authentic leadership. We are so fortunate to have her on the show. Dr. Lopez, welcome to Psych Everywhere.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to talk about this. And I've got about a zillion questions today. So my first one is, in 2014, you co-authored an article called How Authentic Leadership and Inclusion Benefit Organizations. So that was led by, she was then a PhD student, Kenna Cottrell, who you supervised on the project for her dissertation. I'll link to that in the show notes for this episode. But my question is, could you share a little about what is authentic leadership?
Sure, Brad. Authentic leadership is a form of leadership that highlights positive psychological capacities and moral reasoning. So when we think about it, the dictionary definition of authenticity means genuine, bona fide, right? Being actually and exactly what it is claimed. So I would say being authentic is being fully genuine and trustworthy as a leader. So one often quoted example of an authentic leader is a man named Bill George, who literally wrote the book on authentic leadership and in 2005. He's currently a fellow at the Harvard Business School, but, his career has really spanned different forms of leadership up to being a CEO and chairman of the board of a major corporation. According to him, everybody has leadership qualities, but they are all distinct and unique, right? The key is really to develop and demonstrate what is true to ourselves, what is genuine to our own values, to our strengths, and our capacities. And so according to Bill George, also, authentic leaders are not afraid to admit their mistakes, explain their decisions based on values that are true to them, and really create an environment where people can pursue not just their own interests, but the shared interests of the organization.
Could you share a little about how leading with authenticity and emotional intelligence is connected with employee engagement? How do people respond to it?
the reason why authenticity is linked with emotional intelligence and inclusion is really because within a diverse workforce, we are all different. We all come in with our cultural backgrounds, our values, our interests, and strengths, right? And so authentic leaders are able to harness those, and they also respect those qualities, those diverse qualities of their people. And because they respect that and they themselves role model genuineness and authenticity, they're able to create a psychologically safe and inclusive environment where people can feel like, you know what, I can come to work every day and feel like I don't have to pretend to be anybody else but myself. And that's pretty, that's a pretty key thing in today's diverse environment.
It sounds like it would be so natural and so effective to be an authentic leader. But why do you think some leaders fail or maybe choose not to be authentic?
That's a great question, Brad. And I have a few thoughts on the matter. I think leaders fail to be authentic for various reasons, such as, they're not self-aware. So they're not very clear about their values, their skills, and basically who they stand for. And so they might come off as being wishy-washy or unprincipled. A second reason might be that leaders might be trying to be someone else, typically because they think embodying a different persona or a different style might help them to become more successful in a particular environment. But because it's really not truly them, that they're just trying to mimic someone else, it really doesn't come off as sincere. And the third piece is obviously people are not authentic because they are trying to manipulate or take advantage of others. I mean, it's as simple as that. In fact, the research shows that authenticity and ethical behavior are highly correlated. A lot about being authentic is having integrity and also being ethical.
I'm not sure how honest an employee might be if I ask them to tell me if I'm authentic or not. So, how do you know if you're an authentic leader?
Well, first of all, you have to be aware of what's important to you and what's not important to you, and being able to verbalize that. Being able to link your decisions to clear rationale, right? So, for example, if as a leader, I find that I have to fire a lot of people because we have to, our corporation has to survive, being very honest and transparent as to what's going on with employees and treating employees as adults, and really explaining to them, here's the situation, here's how I've made a decision. It's a tough decision, but I've had to make it so as we can save the rest of the organization. So, I have found through experience that when leaders are transparent and explaining what led to a certain behavior or action, then people perceive them to be authentic.
I guess if I'm really grumpy or negative or I worry a lot, maybe it wouldn't be good to be authentic. So, are there
That's true. That's true. I don't know, Brad, there is a term in psychology called emotional labor, right? And it really is when you are showing up to work, at work, in a different way from what you feel. And let me tell you, this happens a lot, especially in customer service or customer facing jobs, right? Where, it might not be a good day for you. Customers shouting at you, and you're there trying to look like nothing has happened, right? That you're not affected by it. So people do engage in that, but it requires a lot of, it's what we call emotional labor, and ultimately it's exhausting. So what I'm saying is that as leaders, there's a certain level of sort of showing up and controlling our emotions, which is, of course, important. But there's also a part where, sometimes it not the best decision might be to step back and really say, you know what, this is not a good time. Give me 5 minutes and let me take a breather here, think through something, and then come back to you. Right. So authentic leaders, A, are transparent. they're also open, and they also realize, in situations where they have to regulate their emotions or manage it, that they're honest with people. And sometimes it also means, explaining their feelings. Like, this is not a great situation. I feel for you. I feel the same. So the question here is, we all feel badly, but what can we do together? So I think the main thing about showing up as being authentic is sincerity, openness, honesty, and also that you walk the talk. Ultimately, walking the talk is what makes you authentic.
I'm not sure if this is a good question, but are there some personalities that are more or less successful as authentic leaders?
Such an interesting question, Brad, and I'm not sure there's enough research about this. That might be actually a good research question for a young psychologist who wants to do a dissertation or two. But we could hypothesize that Machiavellian personalities are probably going to be less authentic, right? Because their goal is to manipulate people and situations to pursue their own ends. But in terms of other personalities, like whether you're an introvert or an extrovert or some other social style, like in the Myers-Briggs type indicator or other assessments, I'm willing to hypothesize that any of these styles can be successful as authentic leaders as long as they're open, willing, and courageous enough to be transparent in their dealings with others. So that's an open question, but I think everybody has the capacity to be genuine because ultimately that's who we are.
So this sounds like the kind of leadership that millennials would really like. Are younger generations of leaders more likely to be authentic?
I'm not sure about whether younger generations are more likely to be authentic, but what I can actually predict is that they are expecting their leaders to be authentic, right? So the research right now suggests that younger generations, millennials, etc., are really looking for meaning in their work, right? That's the number one thing they're looking for is purpose. Really being able to articulate how their work makes sense in the bigger picture. Are they contributing something for the greater good, etc., right? Are they working for an organization that actually supports and mirrors their values? So in that vein, because authentic leaders are value-driven leaders, I'm willing to bet that millennials would appreciate authentic leaders. I'm not sure whether they are authentic leaders, right? But can certainly make a case for educating them and training leaders to become more authentic within their teams and within the organization.
What did you find in your 2014 study? I wondered if you could elaborate a little bit on the effects of authentic leadership and organization-based self-esteem. Actually, you might want to define that.
Yeah, well, it's a mouthful, right? Like in that study, we use certain terminologies like OCB, which is organizational citizenship behavior, organizational based self-esteem. So let me try and explain it, simply but clearly. So Dr. Kenna Cottrell and I embarked on this research because she really had this idea as early as 2014 that authentic leadership might be related to diversity and inclusion. So in this study that we conducted, I supervised her dissertation work. We found through a survey that authentic leadership was positively related to feelings of inclusion. So the more people experience leaders to be authentic, the more they felt included in the workplace. Okay. And it's not just that. We also found that as people felt more included in the workplace, they were more likely to engage in proactive helping behaviors, which technically we call organizational citizenship behavior. So good citizens in organizations tend to be helpful, right? Conscientious, courteous, and respectful to others, and basically demonstrating all kinds of civic virtue by participating in various activities. And citizenship behavior is often not what you see in your formal job description, right? But it's all the other things that reflect what a person does in her environment. So we found that as people felt more included, they tended to engage in more citizenship behavior. The other thing that we found was as people felt more included, they tended to feel better and think better about themselves. So this is what we call organizational-based self-esteem, that you can actually, when your leader is more authentic and you feel more included, you are more likely to feel this sense of importance, this sense of being worthy, which is what we call organizational-based self-esteem. So for various reasons, our study essentially showed how authentic leadership benefits organizations through inclusion, organizational-based self-esteem, and citizenship behavior.
Are there any other benefits of authentic leadership that we haven't really talked about yet, or that I haven't thought to ask?
Great question, Brad, because actually just recently, another of my students, because this leadership and engagement has been the theme of my research lab, but I have another recently graduated student, Renata Bisundat, and we did another research also on authentic leadership. And we found that authentic leadership is associated with feelings of trust within teams and also increased innovative behavior by team members. So when they feel like their leaders are more authentic, people feel that they can take more risks and they feel safe, right? And therefore they're able to engage in creative endeavors and basically be more innovative. And we also found another really interesting tidbit that when people have authentic leaders, they are less likely to engage in counterproductive or harmful work behaviors. For example, slacking off, right? Not being helpful, cheating, or things like that. So when your leader is more authentic, you feel like more included and invested in your work. So you're less likely to essentially slack off and do other non-productive work behaviors. So that's kind of a new twist to this research, but we wanted to look at the benefits, but also the negative side.
Well, that's an interesting thought that I hadn't really had. Are there any other challenges to authentic leadership, either for the employer or the employee, really?
I think establishing an environment where people feel safe to be authentic is, I think, a challenge from a practical side. And this is where, nowadays there's a lot of talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So people are always trying to find solutions to, racial issues or harassment and things like that. And we're finding that, well, it starts with leadership. It starts with leaders actually explaining and mimicking and role modeling what are respectful behaviors and what are open, transparent, and value principled behaviors. And so we're finding that authentic leadership could be one of those styles of leadership that could really help prevent negative behaviors such as harassment and name calling, microaggressions, etc. Because it starts with the leader who role models the positive behaviors.
You've just listened to another episode of Psych Everywhere. This episode was made possible through a Psych sponsorship with the Alliant International University California School of Professional Psychology. That's CSPP. Founded in 1969, CSPP was one of the nation's first independent schools of professional psychology. Today, CSPP continues its commitment to preparing the next generation of mental health professionals and advocates. Their dedication to ensuring every community's access to quality mental health care extends from integrated care to inclusive family therapy. Explore their programs at https://discover www.alliant.edu/psychi/home. There's also a link in the show notes for this episode. I was fascinated by Dr. Lopez's final comments today about how authentic leadership can actually support inclusion. If you too would like to hear more about that topic, then I have some wonderful news. She'll be joining us again for an upcoming episode to discuss what does inclusive leadership really look like. Subscribe to the show today, and you'll be sure to hear it. Do we have any students listening today who are interested in developing leadership skills? Keep in mind that Psychi offers numerous local leadership opportunities through your local chapter. To see a list of potential officer roles, such as president, treasurer, social media voice, newsletter editor, event coordinator, or even helped me officer, visit https://www.psychi.org/chapter_leader. Again, I'll put a link in the show notes too. You could also volunteer to create your own unique officer position. To find out about becoming an officer at your local chapter, reach out to your current local advisor or a member of the existing officer team. If you haven't already subscribed to Psych Everywhere, go ahead and follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Tell a friend or a colleague about the show. Word of mouth is a huge help for podcasts. So share what you learned with your best friend or in your classes. You can also follow us on Twitter at Psychi Podcast and leave a review at Apple Podcast or wherever you go for podcasts. You'll absolutely make my day, and more importantly, you'll be helping us to get Psych everywhere. Okay, that's all for now. I'll connect with you again soon. Copyright 2022, Psychi, the International Honor Society in Psychology. All rights reserved.